All right. Thanks, Bill. Today is a joint meeting with the Norfolk County Commissioners and the Norfolk County Advisory Board Finance Committee. Today's date is Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. And there's an executive order on remote participation. On Thursday, March 12th, 2020. Governor Baker issued an order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Master in Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. That order was effective immediately until it was rescinded or the state of emergency was terminated. On February 12th, 2022, by the action of the legislature, the order was extended until July 15th, 2022.
Thanks.
And votes may be taken on any of the content listed within the notice on the meeting. So we'll do the call to order. Do we do the pledge first? Is that how we do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Bill.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed.
Oh, terrific.
We've got our quorum now.
Awesome.
All right, terrific.
Thank you.
So I'm going to do the roll call of the county commissioners, Dr. Childs, and then you can do the roll call of the finance committee. So I'd like to take the role of the county commissioners. Commissioner Stady.
I am present, having technical difficulties, but I am here.
Okay, Chairman Shea, you're on the call also.
Can't hear him. He's muted.
Okay, Joe, I can see you.
I think he's muted, I think.
Josephine, unmute me. I can read his lips.
Very good. Excellent. You can't read mine right now. Sorry.
No, well, you're always smiling though, Dick. That's good.
Trying. There you go.
Hi, Josephine.
There it is. All right.
Present.
Okay,
There we
Joe, President, and just as long as I have you both at the beginning of this meeting, some signatures may need to take place. Do we have your permission to use the stamp to sign your signatures?
Absolutely. I approve the personnel forms today or any others I noticed too.
Permission granted, Mr. Chairman.
Terrific. Now, Dr. Childs, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can start your meeting up.
Thank you. I'll call the roll for the Finance Committee. Carl Baldoff, Eric Beckerman,
Here.
Paul Connors, Joe Reardon,
Here.
and Elizabeth Childs is here, so we have a quorum. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, terrific. So Joe asked me, because I'm the county commissioner seated here today, Joe asked me to chair the meeting, but he's not too far away to tell me if I go astray. And at this time, I'd like to have the presentation of the report of the Ripples Group on county technology. Mr. Thomas Innes is here to make his presentation. He has a PowerPoint. I believe you already have much of the documentation in his report. It was sent, but he is going to do a PowerPoint. So Mr. Innes, if you could start, and you can sit wherever you want. You have your choice of 3 chairs here.
Maybe I'll come up there so folks can see me well.
Terrific.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Tom.
All right. So a little bit of introduction then. So I'm Tom Innes from the Ripples Group. So a little bit of background. The Ripples Group, we're a boutique management consulting firm based in Boston with clients worldwide. We work across public and private sector. Our focus is really across strategy, operations, technology. And as part of that, we get a lot into change management. How do you create change? How do you set the stage for change? If you're curious to learn more, I suggest check out our website, www.ripplesgroup.com. And some of the expertise we're bringing to this project is we've worked across numerous states, across multiple foundations, government entities, really in a number of different areas of government, including the several different judiciaries. So we've had some experience with the land court coming into this project. You may have seen our names attached to we did an analysis for the trial court, helping them develop a $164 million capital plan that they're currently working against and using to help move the entire, both the trial court and the rest of the judiciary forward. So quite proud of that work. Today, why don't I just jump right in? We wanted to share our findings from our technology assessment that's gone on over the last 3 months. So if you could switch to the agenda slide, we're hoping to go through project approach, then talk about some of our summary findings, and then dive into the detail around criteria and options. So what are some of the options that we're identifying for how to think about moving forward from the county, from the registry, and then we can switch to some next steps.
Terrific.
So in terms of timeline of our efforts, so we started, I mentioned, about 3 months ago, first with an immersion and engagement process, trying to understand current workflows, meeting with the technology teams on both the county side and the registry side. I'll note that our scope of effort didn't include the agricultural school, though we've got a notation about them later on, so we'll bring that up. And then at the end of each phase of this, we've then met with the stakeholders that contributed to it to try to verify, to try to fact check. And so I'm afraid that any of those who have been part of the meetings will find these slides quite boring because you will have seen them before, possibly a couple of times. So following our immersion engagement process, we then developed a set of options for moving forward based on our findings and analysis. And now we're at the end of our alignment and report phase. So we've developed our draft report, looking forward to any comments or feedback on that to help us make sure that we've got the facts right. Of course, you may not, agree with all of the interpretation, but certainly want to make sure that the basis that we're using is shared. So to help with this process, we access a number of sources. We've shared some of them on the next slide, and want to give a thanks to folks at the county and the folks at the registry for being very open with us, meeting with us multiple times, putting up with our questions. And I also want to give some thanks to, we were able to get input from the North Bristol Registry of Deeds, also the Plymouth Registry of Deeds. We got to talk with Paul McCarthy at the state, who has a large role with the state registries. And as much as possible, we've tried to incorporate their data and findings. I should also mention, we also talked with Richard Howe, who's also the Register of Deeds in North Middlesex. All right, so advancing on to the takeaways. And Bill, do you mind moving the slides forward to the, so mentioned sources. All right. So takeaways, high level, what we're seeing, demands on IT are increasing. As you probably know, over the last 2 years, the dependence on IT has increased significantly, seeing significant increases in the volume of e-filing, especially at the registry, going from for many of the registries, going from about 40% to 80% recorded land documents. Other findings include, while the systems are working, from our perspective, the current systems are really based on about a 20-year-old infrastructure. So I'd more and more look at, but I have been doing technology consulting for 20 years. And so I'll tell you, when I started, one of the things I was doing was getting clients off of systems that look like yours. So I'm very familiar with both what the systems look like and some of the challenges you have in migrating off of them. That being said, I should mention that from everything we've heard, it's working today, which is really good news, right? In terms of functionality, what you have on both the county and registry side is working. So it gives you room to change. It gives you some more runway. However, what we're seeing is a diverging vision across the county and the registry, taking really two different directions. So the registry is making a move towards cloud computing, looking at different way to secure systems, backup and storage, whereas on the county side has stayed with modernizing equipment, making sure the equipment is updated, but staying with the older model of storage on site, dependent on on-site resources and local backups, which all has really now put a pretty strong pressure on your current IT staffing. As you know, you're collectively down a person, and it shows in the IT staff. They're able to keep up. They're doing a great job, but there's not a lot of backup. There's not a lot of support, and we saw a significant limitation in the current setup of the county and registry are not in a position to support each other. So some of our suggested findings: begin planning for the refresh and replacement of the Brown Tech system. The Brown Tech system is the registry system. I say refresh or replacement because that's something you need to figure out through a planning process. Look at enhancing your security and vulnerability testing. This is something that I believe has already been brought to the county for core systems and services. So you've got systems that folks are more and more interested in hacking and making your lives difficult. So looking at how can you be proactive with vulnerability testing and then adjusting to the findings. There's an opportunity to modernize your network. Right now, it's your network is largely based on closed local area networks with fiber optic cables running around. To think about how can you move to actually virtual networks, and again, actually move to how can you better leverage the cloud in terms of both security and network. And then think about how to develop the current staff. How can you create a technology savvy workforce? Because, as the volume of e-filing continues, the volume of electronic requirements on the county, on HR systems, all of that will increase. So how do you make sure that your workforce is ready for it? Even things like building management. How do you have a building management system where you're actually logging issues, working against them, and having more responsive reports. There's a number of different opportunities there, but you have to have a staff that's ready for it. And to get there, we're suggesting consider a technology strategic plan and really developing a system vision that is comprehensive for Norfolk, so that you've got alignment across systems. All right, so how do we get there? And there's a number of slides. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. We've covered all of this in the report, but just so that you have a better sense of the framing and get a little bit better sense of what were some of the activities that we were involved in. So we're seeing across county and registry, similar size, approximately 100 employees. That in terms of applications on the county side, the largest application is the Infant Visions that's a Tyler product that's in the process of, or has actually launched now as a cloud application. But then you also have AutoCAD on the engineering side and backup systems on the engineering side. Both the county and registry using Microsoft products. I mentioned that on the registry side, real dependence on Brown Tech software as well. Brown Tech as a vendor. And then in terms of outside users, it's notable that the registry both has public access terminals, but also has to have online access to records and outside access. This is important because on the next slide, we had, as I mentioned, looked at the recorded volume, how it's changing. So all of the registries that we spoke with and the reporting we got from the state all identified that consistently the registries have 80% e-recorded volume, and everyone we spoke with thinks it'll stay the same or go up. You're not going to see a retreat. So then the question is, how are you supporting this volume coming in, and how are your IT resources doing supporting it? So we launched a staff survey. The staff survey we got, we happened to get equal responses, 23 from the county and from the registry side, reflective of the different roles, both at the county and the registry. We found a similar level of satisfaction for both, which is on the next slide. And you'll see that in our report. Both satisfied or neutral. No one reported being dissatisfied with the technology support that they're receiving. All right, and can you move on to the next slide? So we wanted to highlight email access. That email access in itself is, you could debate its relative importance. The way we use it is to understand how are you using electronic communication, and knowing that you've got, especially on the registry side, a huge amount of communication that is now moving to digital. How are you supporting that, and how are you making sure your staff are supporting that and able to support it? It also gives you insight into, are you ready for the next level of communication, not just email, but now moving to things like chat, moving to things like online, functions like if you've used a Microsoft Teams where you can actually collaborate online, supporting the users of the registry and of county services. When we looked at the comments of folks that answered the survey, if you could move to the next slide. We found similar comments across both the county and the registry. On the county side, expressing satisfaction, real appreciation for the individual folks, and similarly on the registry side, which is on the next slide. So I won't read these directly. You can check them out. The difference on the registry side was, stating the need for ongoing support, and really wanting to make sure that there was support in person at the registry to help folks' needs. All right. If you could jump forward on this slide, and then if we could jump to the next slide. So we looked at then IT staffing, and we were able to compare the Norfolk to then Plymouth, Bristol, and we're able to get some numbers from the state in terms of FTEs. So consistently, the registries have a single FTE that's available for on-site support. On the state side, keep in mind that while there's an FTE identified, on the state side, they also have the support of EOTSS, the the state CIO and the ability to deploy resources to support systems. Some additional observations on the next slide. So I had mentioned, so the brown tech we see as a technology risk, that you've got high dependence on a single vendor. They've got minimal client base. It's an aging software. It's a mix of coding. This is the type of software where it gets harder every year to find the resources to support it. So bottom line, we suggest start the planning and replacement. And I mentioned already that we saw some opportunities on the network side, especially when you think about the continuity of operations and backup. So today the registry is backed up in 3 different locations. The reality is those locations are quite close to each other. It'd be much better to see a backup location in Springfield, even better to see one in California. Having all your backups in a similar area, it does give you one level of continuity, but for instance, should a major storm hit the community, it's going to take out all 3, or has the potential to. And then on the brown tech side, I mentioned that there's technology risk. There's also technology opportunity. So we were able to compare the brown tech system looking at a high level against other available registry products, which is on the next slide. And we saw that there was some difference in the ability to customize workflows, the ability to back up and host offsite, and functionality such as redaction within the interface. So many of the other vendors have been able to move towards a higher level of functionality than you're able to access with the brown tech product.
Please give me. Sorry.
We'll need the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we need the PowerPoint back.
What happens is when I get kicked off, you become the host. I will make myself the host again. Hey, host.
All right. Well, the PowerPoint's coming up. Let me just speak to it. So we came up with 4 options. The first is really trying to reflect the current model, which we're calling a 2-headed model, which is effectively how we're interpreting what you have. You sort of have 2 groups, 2 different sets of leadership. We identified a totally separate, which is, so if you were going to, fully implement from the model that you sort of backed into today, we define that as a totally separate model. And then a division model where, and I'll get a little bit more into what I mean by that, and finally a consolidated model. So the 2x2 that we're considering is, on the bottom is consolidation. So the level of consolidation. And then the vertical here is a term we're using, cloudiness, which is how well you are using, how much you are using cloud functions, cloud hosting. And so we put the 4 options against those 2 metrics. Bill, if you could hit advance. So you can see then the 4 go against that. All right, so let me walk through the options. So on the totally separate, Bill, maybe just click through these so they all come up on the screen. All right, thanks. So on the totally separate, you've got separate leadership, bifurcated staff, 2 really independent visions with separate security, hosting, backup requirements, separate documentation, which would mean effectively you'd also have 2 versions of infinite visions. On the 2-headed, that's kind of where you stand today, where you've got separate applications. You have the common ERP, which is infinite visions. you've got common phone, but you have separate security standards. You have multiple server rooms. You have effectively 2 IT departments and separate email and split support. The division model is then would be a consolidation. So single leader, dedicated teams. What defines this is that you would have a dedicated team supporting the registry and the Brown Tech system, and then a dedicated team to your shared systems on the county side. And then the fourth option is really a further consolidation where you'd go further and say, okay, not just a single leader, but actually having a centralized staff, having a consolidated server room, and then on the use of cloud computing, we'd see this option as shifting to a SaaS model as much as possible. So shifting also to remote hosting for as many applications as possible. And then you'd have common documented policies and procedures, practices. And then we'd also suggest a simplified local infrastructure. So looking across these 4, and so to be clear, these are what we tried to do is define some discrete options. One of the differences across these is the number of FTEs it would take to support this. So on a totally separate model, you'd be looking at, from our perspective, at least 5 FTEs. So you always have a primary and a backup person that and be able to handle the volume at the registry in the county. Under the 2-headed model, right now you've got 2.5 FTEs. If you add everybody up, from our perspective, it's not enough. But you'd be looking at 4 to 5 to fully staff this and provide sufficient backup. On the division model, this one to us looks more like a 4 FTE because you'd have something like 2 on the county side, 2 on the registry side, but then cross-trained teams so they can support each other. And then finally on the consolidated, there's the potential to go below 4 FTEs, but this would probably have additional costs because you'd be outsourcing more of the function. So hopefully that helps define what these are. We had developed with the project resources a set of criteria. So how do we evaluate these? So on the next slide were our evaluation criteria. I won't get into these in detail, but looking at user experience, security, cost, maintenance, scalability, and then operational effectiveness. When we evaluated the options against our criteria, which is, Bill, if you could move to the next slide. So looking at these, we can see from a user experience perspective, we saw in fairly equal across, a little bit of drop in user experience because internal users, we saw that their experience may degrade. On a security and continuity of operations, Bill, if you could click forward. On this one, we saw that the continuity of operations is greater with the division and consolidated. A lot of that is that your continuity of operations is increased by having increased use of cloud functions, cloud computing. In terms of cost and transition burden, we saw that the totally separate or the 2-headed model, you're seeing increased costs due to the increase in number of people you need to provide backup. In our view, the division model came out the best in terms of cost because the consolidated to make the kind of changes that would be required, you would incur pretty significant costs. So while there might be so it's it's less of an FTE consideration, more of a change management consideration. On maintenance, in our view, consolidated model is going to be much easier to maintain because you've got similar architecture, similar systems, and again, using cloud hosting. In terms of scale and adaptability, this one further goes towards the division or consolidated model. And then in terms of operational effectiveness, we didn't see it as advantageous to have two separately functioning IT departments within the county and registry. In terms of the division model, there's a question mark there because it really comes down to governance. How do you create a governance model that supports the needs and expectations across all the different functions of the county? To that, on the next slide, we wanted to bring into this is a great white paper that I'd suggest you check out from the National Center for State Courts on IT governance. And what they identified was that there needs to be real clear agreement across policy leaders. How are we going to manage the IT function? How are we going to not just share resources, but share the sacrifice, share the work, share the benefits? And how can that also be encoded in some way so that you've got a charter of expectations. You've clarified this is how we're going to support each other. If I could, I wanted to just add a couple things that aren't in the report, but I thought it was worth sharing. So in terms of the CIO role, some things to look for that and we've grabbed a quote here. The CIO's role becomes one of helping management change by supplying vision, direction, and supporting technology. So some of the things that we want to highlight of what do you want to look for in a CIO role? Experience as both a leader and a technology leader. So you need both. Experience as a strategic planner, being able to look ahead, define a vision, work towards it. This is increasingly important as technology is moving pretty fast. And you need to stay ahead and have a plan to get there because you've got major capital expense. Skill balancing risk and cost. This is especially true with oh, do you mind moving back? All right, sorry. You need an innovation mindset. This seems a little straightforward, but right, you want a CIO that loves technology, like really loves technology, that thinks about it day and night and is really looking for what's the next thing. And then the last piece that we've identified, which is crucial, is success with vendor management. As systems are more and more outsourced, you are dependent more and more on vendors, especially with the size of the team across the county and the registry. You need the expertise that a vendor is able to bring because they're able to spread costs across. So having things like a chief security officer, you don't have that today. That's best practice. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense for you to hire a chief security officer for the functions that you have today. So how can you leverage your vendor relationships to take advantage of having somebody whose role it is to think day and night about how do we secure the systems and how do we make sure that they've got strong uptime. The last piece is just thinking in terms of, as you're considering the options, I put together just a very high level roadmap, which is the next slide. So think in terms of, right, whatever direction you take, building, staffing, and leadership. Throughout now FY23, addressing immediate challenges and implementing the corresponding changes. So vulnerability testing, policies and procedures, looking at your hosting, defining your strategic plan, implement that plan, and start implementing that next year. And then assuming that's going to be a 3 to 5 year plan in parallel to plan for the Brown Tech replacement / refresh. That we would see that the plan for Brown Tech should be part of that vision and strategic plan. All right, and with that, that's what we wanted to present today. Are there any questions we can help with, especially as you review the report or anything I brought up?
Yeah, Commissioners, Joe Shea, do you have any questions? All right, Joe, you're muted again.
You're muted, Joe. Somehow you're muted.
Again. I'm muted again.
No, you're all set, Joe. We can hear you now. So what questions do you have, Joe?
Are you touching this?
You're all set. You're all set.
No, you're on.
Okay. I don't have a question today. I will have them next week.
Okay. How about you, Dick? What do you got?
A couple of quick comments. Thank you, Peter. First, thank you to Tom and the Ripples
Yes.
for doing a very, thank you for the group for doing a very comprehensive look at an ongoing issue that's been troubling to all of us. I have a couple of specific questions. I have to confess, I got the report like most of us late yesterday. I've read it a couple of times. I want to do a deeper dive, but if I could I fire away a couple of things, if possible, real quick? Tom, you mentioned the cost of division versus consolidation will be more expensive. If I've got that right, is there any way you can quantify that for us now or as soon as possible to help us in the evaluation? That's my first question. Second, you have outlined a plan of action for us, which I think bodes to us as commissioners, perhaps the formation of some kind of a teacher committee that we could comprise, made up perhaps of maybe a commissioner's office representative, someone from the registry, someone from the school department, perhaps a citizen at large with a strong tech background. And of course, we would want input from the advisory board. Maybe they could designate someone. I think if this committee begins to work perhaps in concert in looking at this report and looking also at the report of the Abraham Group, we might be able to form a strategy, as the Ripples Group is saying, a strategic strategy for us to move forward in a timely manner and start to implement the right direction for us. I think change is coming. I think that's what this is pointing out, and we all have to accept it and embrace it. And the third thing I just wanted to know was, you mentioned the school. You kind of threw a curve in there, and that the school could be considered. So that's something for us to kind of consider as well, both maybe short-term and long-term. So those are my initial thoughts. If you want to respond to that, that's fine. I know it's a draft, which means it's not a finished product. I know as an educator, when people turned in drafts, I had the red pencil out and I was always marking things up. I'm going to refrain from that, but I think overall you did a good job and I appreciate your effort. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for that. So to try to address your 3 points in terms of cost, let me see what we can do in terms of responding to your question around quantifying the cost. I don't have an answer today, but let me work on that. In terms of the strategic committee, that makes a lot of sense to me to have it led by a group. I think our assessment, our process has really benefited from having numerous stakeholders involved. And so to continue to have that level of involvement, I think would be great. I would say though that if you are going to go that direction, it needs a strong lead. It needs that strong voice that is going to own the plan going forward, that can help lead the development of the vision, but then implementing the vision. And then in terms of the school, it's a thought in terms of, if you go with a true division model, that if the benefit of that option is having a single vision for IT, a single vision for how you're going to use systems, a single vision for how you want to secure the systems, how you want to use local resources versus cloud-based resources, that if you're going to have teams that support and back up one another, that then to think about, does it make sense to also have the school as another division? So you've got a dedicated IT team there. Would the school also benefit from similarly having a shared vision for how you want to do hosting, a similar vision for security? So it's a thought. If it makes sense to do it for the county and the registry, does it also make sense to include the school?
Okay, that's fine. And like I said, I'm not going to dwell too much. I think, as Peter and Shay said, we're just getting it today. You did a good job presenting it and giving us options. We've got a lot of things to kick around. And again, I appreciate your effort. I really do. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Childs, if I can turn it over to you, I'm sure the Finance Committee has some questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so our Finance Committee members, let's see if we've got some questions here. Carl, welcome, by the way. Do you have anything you want to add, Carl, since you just jumped on?
No, thank you. I just jumped on and I really haven't had time to read the report. So I'm sorry I missed the introduction, but I'm here anyway.
Okay, thank you. Joe.
Thank you, Chair Childs. Tom, thank you very much for your presentation. It was excellent. I, like Commissioner Stady, had the opportunity to kind of go through the written report. Would like to take a deeper dive, but a couple of the points that kind of hit home for me. One is with regard to leveraging vendor relationships. One of the chief concerns that was presented in the arguments about, what could transpire without proper staffing and the like, particularly with the CIO direct report at the registry, was around cybersecurity. One of the direct questions I asked early on in this process was, how can you leverage your vendor relationships to make sure that security is not an issue? And I believe that there are a lot of outside vendors that could be utilized in that way. You mentioned specifically a chief security officer not being able to be necessarily funded or needed, but to have that back fill, if you will, from a vendor. Can you explain a little more of that process? Because I think that's a process that other people had suggested we address previous to this situation now, where things were kind of not being filled, positions weren't being filled. And one of my direct questions is, why can't we use another vendor? Can you explain how that works and how that would play into a long-term solution for cybersecurity?
So let me try to address that. So let me give you an example. So with several years ago, as part of a major push from the governor's office and the AG's office, we were part of the implementation of the new prescription monitoring program. So the prescription monitoring program collects the data from every prescription that is written in the state for Schedule 2 and 3 pharmaceuticals. And then they're also collecting all of the data from each of the pharmacies on what was actually dispensed. As you can imagine, this is very sensitive data. When we were helping the state bring in the new vendor, whose name is Apris, they, as they were coming in, we made it very clear that they had to present to us the results of penetration and vulnerability testing. And so a requirement of their going live in the state was they had to show us the result of the test and then show us how they had mitigated any of the high or medium results against their system. And in this case, Massachusetts happened to be the first client to ask them, which is a little strange. But anyway, they grumbled a little bit, but they understood that it made their system better. They tested their system. They mitigated the results. They tested again. They proved that to the standard that was in the contract, that their system was secure. And as part of the contract, they're also on the hook to regularly test their system by an independent third party. So in this case, this is what I mean by vendor management. We put the burden on the vendor coming in to make sure that their system was secure. So and we had gotten guidance from state IT resources to know what's the standard we need to ask for, but then have the vendor be on the hook to comply with it.
Great, thank you. So just to kind of look at it from a different perspective, and you did mention Brown Tech. One of the issues with Brown Tech has been the decrease in revenues, and it has been suggested that that's due to a security issue where people can access these documents using screenshots without watermarks and things like that. So part of any relationship would be to ensure that the vendor can protect the data so that if, for example, it needs to be disseminated in a way that's protected, or if someone needs to get some sort of certified document from it, that it would eliminate any sort of kind of cyber theft or data theft or things like that. Would that be kind of a fair assessment? The vendor would be responsible for ensuring.
I mean, if I'm understanding your question, could you lean on the vendor to help ensure the security of documents? I think that's what you're expecting of them. That's a good one. So then the question is, have you set the right standard for the vendor to comply to?
Okay. And that's exactly where I was going with it, because I mean, I'm not a tech expert. That's why, as a member of the advisory board, I voted to provide the funding for someone like yourself, an expert, to come in and do it. But I think sometimes people who aren't experts defer to what they've always done, thinking that continuing that may be okay. But I would suggest that this may be a good indicator that we need to kind of take a new look at things, as Commissioner Stady said, all these changes, and devise something that's going to be best for the county. So I just want some clarification on that. So I appreciate your.
You know, if I could add, I feel like I should mention that from everything we've heard, Brown Tech there's a very good relationship with Brown Tech today. That they're a responsive vendor. That there's you're lucky that you're happy with the system today overall. And so I just want to be clear about that we're seeing that there's risks. But again, there's one runway to then mitigate those risks.
Thanks, Tom.
Any other questions, Joe, from you? No.
No,
How
thank you,
about
Madam
Eric?
Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Childs. I have a couple. Well, I have a few questions, but I don't know if I can address them all here. I think I'll have to save some of them. I don't have a copy of the actual report, so I want to be able to go through that first. So this is my first time seeing any presentation. But it sounds like we have quite a few issues here. We have infrastructure issues. We have we need a strategic plan to figure out which way we're going and how we're gonna design this monster. I don't know exactly how to address it. We know we have needs. We know it needs to be addressed, but it sounds like we have hardware issues. We have software issues. It's not limited to just positions. So
we're getting background noise here. I don't know on my end. Someone's talking. I can't hear her.
I'm gonna reserve any additional questions so I can have a chance to kind of digest all this.
All right.
Tom, are you able to address some of those?
Well,
Did we-
That's why we're looking at, looking at both, from a leadership perspective, and then also really defining what's your strategic path forward, because there's a lot of opportunity and the world is changing around you. So how can you anticipate what do you need to do next? The challenging thing with an assessment like this is, we could tell you all the things that are going well, but that's not terribly helpful. So we're harping on the things that we think you need to address.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I agree with what's been said to this point. I think this the presentation has been great. But again, to my point, I think my takeaway from this right now is that we have a few different concerns here. We have a staffing question that needs to be resolved. We have capital needs, both financial and on the software and hardware side. So it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts that are going to happen, and that's going to have to come out of this. That we'll definitely have to sit down and come up. I think the strategic plan obviously has to be one of the first things we got to do. Sit down and figure out exactly where we want to go. But again, that's more comment than question, Madam Chairman. So again, I may have more questions in the future, but thank you.
Thanks. I just had a couple of questions myself, Tom, if you could take them. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. The first one was, I thought you were making a very clear point about needing a really strong lead to guide the development of the vision, the strategic plan, and then suggesting that some continuity of that going forward to execute it would be really helpful to the county. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. Yeah. So it's really hard to come up with, a comprehensive 5-year strategic plan and then hire somebody and tell them, okay, now please implement it.
Right.
And so you as much as possible really want that person at the table.
Okay. That's what I thought I understood. I want to be sure. It reminds me, I'm a doc by training, and it reminds me of it's really hard to do the treatment if you haven't done the evaluation. It's the same principle of like the continuity makes a difference. Okay, so then I just had a couple questions. One, could you just make a comment, an opinion maybe about the value of integration of the school in the long term over time in terms of an IT system versus keeping it separate? I mean, in your experience, have you seen that be particularly helpful, or what are your thoughts about that?
It's a good question. It's hard to comment on because we really didn't look at the school and what the school has today.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so that would be one thing that might be part of a plan, would be to include a question of evaluating what they have today and what would be the value of including it in a larger vision.
Yeah.
Would that be that's a fair statement?
Okay. Yeah, so we're suggesting, revisit it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's great. And then the other question I had was about money issues, and it sounds like the transition cost is significant to go to a fully consolidated system. Could you comment a little bit on one-time, short-term, and long-term differential in that cost? And is it one of those situations where the upfront cost is a lot, but then in the long run, you're on a more stable platform, or it's better, or just can you give us some framework for that in terms of timing of cost?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, if you were going to implement a new system, traditionally the maintenance is right. The rule of thumb is the maintenance is 20% of the implementation cost. However, it's a big upfront cost and then decreases later on. If you really shift to a software as a service model, that tends to spread that out. So then your implementation cost you're not buying a system. you're really sort of leasing the access to a system. So that brings down that implementation cost, but you're still looking at things like if you were going to move if you were going to move from Brown Tech to an entirely different system, you would have things like you'd have to spend a large amount of time and effort, which translates to money, in moving all of your data over. It may be keeping the systems parallel for a while to make sure that everything's running as you expected. So the same pain that I believe that the registry incurred moving from whatever the previous system was to the Brown Tech system, you're going to see that again.
Okay, that's really helpful. One of the challenges we have in the county is our revenues go up and down a lot. And so to keep our budgets in a place where we can fund it with a clear revenue projection over like a 5-year revenue projection is sometimes challenging. Do you have a sense of, are the costs more predictable once you do this more consolidated model, or is that not true?
I mean, it's hard to say. It's the typically if you're using software as a service, the idea is that you're part of a large pool of clients.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of being, one of 10 clients, you're one of 100 or one of 1,000 clients, and so any incremental improvement to that system, you're only absorbing a small amount of that cost.
I see. Okay. That's very helpful, Tom. Thank you. And thank you again for the report. It's really great. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, I think that does it, Mr. Chairman, from the Finance Committee.
Okay, so if you're all set for the Finance Committee, I don't know if you want to adjourn your meeting, Dr. Childs?
I think we can, unless there's any other issues you need us for. That's it.
I think we're all
Carl?
set.
You all right? Okay. Let's, can I have a motion to adjourn? The Finance Committee. Thank you,
So
Carl.
moved.
Second from Eric. Okay,
Yep.
we'll do a roll call. Eric,
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Uh-huh.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Good seeing you.
I think you're all set. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm going to stick around for a little while if everybody's all right with that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Commissioner, just before we have Tom leave, I'd like to just request a copy of today's report. There's a few changes.
Oh, the
Today's.
slides?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Dick, if it's okay with you, I'd like to take a break for just a couple of minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah, but real quick, Peter, again, I got a copy of the draft, so through you, of course. Could you ask him if he has an idea when we'll get the final report, or was this the final report? Because
So this is still a draft.
okay, all right. So any idea, Tom, if I ask you when the final report may be done? A couple of weeks maybe, or, that, not putting you on the spot, but roughly an idea?
Yeah, actually, John has an answer to that. Go ahead.
I think the goal, Commissioner, was to launch the report today and welcome feedback over the next week in
Okay,
anticipation of a potential vote on next Wednesday, May 4th, when the commissioners were slated and scheduled to have the second part of their public hearing on the FY23 budget.
all right. So any stakeholder could provide input on this report for another week or so, roughly, right? Correct?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
All right, that's enough time. Thank you very much. And again, good job. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Look forward to any edits, comments, etc.
We've talked.
So Joe and Dick, if it's okay with you, I just want to take a break for a couple minutes. Is that all right?
Sure, no problem. Yep.
Okay.